So guys, my name's Brittany. I'm 34, and I'm from sunny Phoenix, Arizona. This story is about my ex-husband, Eric. Yeah, we'll call him Eric because honestly, he doesn't deserve to have his real name protected after what he put me through. Eric is 36, super laid back to the point where it's actually annoying, and literally never gets stressed about anything. Which sounds good in theory, but trust me, it gets old when you're the only one in the relationship who actually cares about getting things done. I've always been the more intense one. Some people call it passionate. Others might say driven. Whatever you want to call it, I'm the one who made our relationship work. So this whole mess started at one of Eric's friend Troy's parties. Now, Eric barely has any friends. Like seriously, I could count them on one hand. So when he actually wanted to socialize, I made the effort to go. I figured we'd show up, have a few drinks, network a little, and bounce after a couple hours. Pretty standard stuff. The house was absolutely packed, and everyone seemed to know each other, which made sense because Eric had been friends with these people since like high school or something. I didn't know everyone there, but that's never been a problem for me. I'm super social, and honestly, I kind of love being the center of attention when I'm in the right mood. While Eric was doing his whole quiet, awkward catch-up thing with Troy, I did what I do best. I mingled. I'm really good at reading rooms and making people laugh, so within like an hour, I had this whole group of people cracking up at my stories. So a few hours into the party, we're all sitting in this circle just talking about random stuff. You know how party conversations go. Someone brought up relationships and trust, like hypothetically, how much would you trust your partner to have your back if things got serious? It was all theoretical, just fun conversation. I looked at Eric, who was sitting next to me being his usual quiet self, and honestly, the joke just came to me naturally. I said something like, "Oh, I know Eric wouldn't be able to protect me. I mean, just look at him." And guys, the room erupted, like people were dying laughing. It felt amazing to get that kind of reaction, so obviously I kept going. I mean, when you're on a roll, you don't stop, right? I made some jokes about how he doesn't work out, how he sometimes needs help opening pickle jars, and threw in this hilarious bit about how if we got mugged, we'd both be victims because he'd probably just freeze up. People were absolutely losing it. Even Troy jumped in with some joke about Eric skipping leg day. It turned into this whole roast session, and I was basically the star of the show. Here's where things get weird. Eric didn't say anything during my obviously hilarious performance. He just sat there with this weird, fake smile, like he was trying not to ruin the vibe but clearly wasn't enjoying himself. Instead of just going with the flow like a normal person, I decided to really bring it home. I pointed at his arms and said, "Seriously though, he's got the muscle definition of a middle schooler. No offense, babe." The crowd went wild again. I mean, it was objectively funny, and it's not like I was saying anything that wasn't true. Eric's always been more of a indoor activities kind of guy. But then, and I swear this came out of nowhere, Eric just stood up. Like abruptly stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked straight out of the room. No explanation, no, "Hey, I'll be right back." Nothing. Just bounced. At first I thought maybe he was going to the bathroom or needed some air. But when 5, then 10 minutes passed and he didn't come back, I realized he had actually left. Like left the entire party. Without me. The whole mood in the room shifted instantly. People stopped laughing, and there was this super awkward silence. Marcus looked at me and was like, "Yo, that was kind of harsh," which honestly threw me off because, hello? It was clearly just jokes. We tease each other all the time. I didn't break some sacred rule or anything, and I tried to play it cool. I shrugged and was like, "He's probably just tired or whatever, he'll be fine." But inside, I was actually getting annoyed. Like, what was his problem? It's not like I was lying about anything, and it's not like anyone there was going to think less of him. If anything, I thought I was making him look good for being able to laugh at himself. I stayed at the party for a while longer, but honestly, the vibe was totally killed. People were being polite, but it felt forced and weird. Eventually, I said my goodbyes and called an Uber home, which was super inconvenient since Derek was supposed to be my ride. When I got home, Derek was already in bed, clearly fake sleeping. I didn't say anything because I figured he'd get over it by morning. That's usually how these things go. He gets in his feelings about something, sleeps on it, and then we're back to normal. But the next day, things were definitely different. He was giving me the cold shoulder hardcore. When he did talk to me, it was super short and clipped, like he couldn't be bothered to have a real conversation. I finally asked him what his deal was, and he looked at me with this dramatic expression and said, "You humiliated me in front of my friends." That caught me completely off guard because, again, I really didn't think it was that serious. I told him, "It was a joke, Derek. Don't be so sensitive." He didn't even respond. He just walked out of the room, and that's when I realized he was going to milk this for all it was worth. The next morning, Derek was already up drinking his coffee when I came downstairs. He didn't even look up when I walked in, which immediately irritated me. Like, okay, you were upset last night, but this silent treatment thing was not going to work for me. "Morning," I said, pouring myself coffee. Complete silence. He just kept scrolling on his phone like I was invisible. "Okay, are we seriously doing this?" I asked, sitting across from him. "Because if we are, let's just get it over with." He finally looked up and said, "Why would you think it's okay to humiliate me like that in front of my friends?" His voice wasn't loud, but it had this sharp edge to it. "Oh my God, Derek, are you still on this? It was a joke," I said, rolling my eyes. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you." "Well, that's exactly what you did," he snapped back. "You made me feel like a fool in front of everyone. You don't think I already know I'm not the strongest guy in the world? You didn't need to put it on display like that." I leaned back and crossed my arms. "Okay, but you left me there, Derek, alone. You're mad about a joke, but you thought it was totally fine to just walk out and abandon your wife at your friend's house? How is that okay?" "I needed to get out of there," he said, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea how disrespectful you were? You don't talk about your husband like that, Brittany, especially not in front of other people. It's like you were trying to embarrass me." "Derek, it was teasing," I laughed, more out of frustration than anything else. Everyone was laughing. It's not like I stood up and gave a PowerPoint presentation about your failures, and honestly, walking out like that didn't exactly prove me wrong. You left me there to Uber home like some random person. What kind of man does that? His face turned red and I could see him clenching his jaw. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice getting louder. "You don't respect me. If you did, you wouldn't have said half the stuff you did last night. You wouldn't have kept going when you saw how uncomfortable I was. Of course I respect you, Derek, but you didn't exactly act respectable last night, did you? A grown man doesn't just storm out and abandon his wife because he's upset over a joke. You could have pulled me aside and said something. Instead, you bailed, and now you want to lecture me about respect." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could tell he was processing what I said. Finally, he sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "You're right," he muttered. "I shouldn't have left you there. That wasn't okay." I raised an eyebrow, honestly surprised he was actually admitting it. "Yeah, that's what I thought," I said, leaning forward. "So maybe next time, don't overreact and make everything worse. If you had just talked to me instead of having a meltdown, we wouldn't even be having this conversation." He didn't say anything for a second, just stared down at his coffee. "I just wish you'd think about how what you say affects me," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to change who you are, just think about it." I shrugged, not wanting to drag this out any longer now that he'd apologized. "Sure, I'll think about it. But you also need to think about how you handle things when you're upset. Deal?" He nodded, though he still looked kind of annoyed. I could tell this wasn't completely over for him, but as far as I was concerned, we were good. He apologized, which meant I won the argument, and that was that. After our conversation, I felt pretty great about everything. Derek had apologized, which meant I'd handled the situation correctly, and I figured that would be the end of it. Sure, he still seemed a little moody, but he'd get over it. He always did. That's just how our relationship worked. He'd get upset about something, I'd stand my ground and explain why he was wrong, and eventually he'd come around and apologize. Derek had never really been the take charge type anyway. I'd always been the one who kept our relationship moving forward, whether it was making plans, handling our finances, or even deciding what to watch on Netflix. He never minded. If anything, I think he preferred it that way. It's not like he ever fought me on decisions or anything. So when I say I was the one in control of our relationship, I'm not being dramatic. That's just how we functioned. And it worked perfectly. Well, it worked perfectly for me, and Derek never complained, so I assumed it worked for him too. A couple nights later, Derek told me he was going out for dinner with some friends. "Marcus and the guys," he said, like that was all the explanation I needed. I raised an eyebrow but didn't press him about it. I mean, I could pretty much guess what this was about. One of those typical guys' nights where they all get together and complain about their girlfriends and wives over beers and wings. They were probably going to spend the whole night talking about how terrible I am and how Derek deserves so much better. I wasn't stupid. I'd seen how Marcus and his crew looked at me after the party, and honestly, I wasn't even surprised. Guys like Marcus always act like they're above drama and gossip, but they're actually just as bad as women when it comes to talking behind people's backs. Still, I didn't say anything. If Derek needed to vent to his little support group, whatever. Let him get it out of his system. He'd come home, and everything would go back to normal. But when he came back that night, something felt different. It wasn't anything super obvious or dramatic. He wasn't storming in with accusations or starting fights. It was more subtle than that. He seemed quieter than usual, like he was deep in thought about something. And when I asked him how dinner was, he just shrugged and said, "It was fine." "Just fine?" I teased, trying to lighten whatever weird mood he was in. "What, did Marcus burn the burgers or something?" He gave me this small kind of forced smile and said, "No, the food was good. Just have a lot on my mind." That was weird for Derek. Normally he'd tell me everything about his nights out, who said what, which stories got the biggest laughs, what drama was happening in everyone's lives. He was usually pretty chatty about that stuff. But not this time. This time he just brushed me off and went to bed early, leaving me sitting there wondering what the hell was going on. Over the next few days, I started noticing more changes in Derek's behavior. Little things at first, but they added up. He didn't seem as eager to go along with my plans anymore. Like when I suggested we watch a movie, he said, "You pick, I'll just watch whatever," but in this tone that felt more annoyed than indifferent. Or when I brought up our weekend plans, he casually mentioned that he might go hiking with Marcus instead, which was definitely not something he'd normally do. Derek wasn't exactly what you'd call outdoorsy. It wasn't just his actions either, it was his whole attitude. He seemed more confident, maybe? I don't know how else to describe it. Like he wasn't waiting for my approval before doing things. I wasn't used to this version of Derek, and I definitely didn't like it. Not because I wanted to control him or anything. Okay, maybe a little, but because it felt like he was pulling away from me. Like he was shutting me out, and I had no idea why. One night, I finally brought it up. "You've been acting different lately," I said while we were getting ready for bed. "What's going on?" He looked at me, and for a second I thought he was going to deny it. But then he said, "I've just been thinking a lot. About us. About me. About what I want." That threw me off completely. "What you want," I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "Just that I've been letting things slide for too long. I've been too passive, too whatever. I need to start standing up for myself more. That's all." I laughed, trying to play it off, but inside I felt this weird pang of unease. "You make it sound like I've been running some kind of dictatorship or something. Is this still about the party? Because we already talked about that and you apologized." "It's not just the party," he said, looking me straight in the eye. It's everything. And just like that, the conversation had shifted. It wasn't about one night or one joke anymore. It was about our entire relationship. And for the first time, I realized Derek might not be okay with how things had always been between us. For the first time, I started wondering if I was losing control of the situation. Derek came home from work one evening, and I could tell immediately that something was on his mind. He had that serious look he gets when he's been rehearsing a conversation in his head for hours. I didn't ask what it was, though. If it was important, he'd tell me. At least that's how it usually worked. We had dinner mostly in silence, and then just as I was clearing the plates, he finally spoke up. "We need to talk." I sighed, already feeling annoyed. "Okay, what now?" He didn't flinch at my tone, which was unusual for him. Instead, he leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. "Why do you treat me the way you do?" That caught me completely off guard. What are you even talking about? I mean the way you talk to me, the way you act like you're the only one who matters in this relationship. Do you even respect me, Brittany? Honestly. I rolled my eyes. Of course I respect you, Derek. You're my husband. Why are you even asking me that? He shook his head, looking frustrated. Because you don't act like it. You humiliated me in front of my friends, and when I tried to tell you how I felt, you made it about how I overreacted. You don't listen to me. You don't care what I want, and half the time it feels like I'm just here to be your punching bag. That's not fair, I shot back. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I told you it was a joke. You're the one who made it into this huge, dramatic thing. Brittany, he said, his voice getting sharper. This isn't just about the party. It's about everything. The way you talk to me, the way you dismiss me when I try to express how I feel. If you really respected me, you wouldn't treat me like this. I felt my face getting hot. Derek, don't act like you're some perfect angel in all of this. You don't stand up for yourself. You let me handle everything, and now you want to sit here and act like I'm the villain. Maybe if you stepped up more, I wouldn't have to take charge all the time. That's not an answer, he said, cutting me off. Why did you even marry me if you don't respect me? Was it convenience? Because I was a safe choice? Or was there something else? Because I'm starting to think I'm not the person you actually wanted to marry. I froze. The words hit me like a slap across the face. That's ridiculous, I said quickly. You're twisting this into something it's not. Am I? He challenged, his voice rising now. Because the way you treat me doesn't feel like love, Brittany. It feels like I'm just here, like I'm not enough for you. And maybe I never was. That's not true, I snapped, but even as I said it, I could feel my defenses starting to crack. You're overthinking this. You're letting your friends get in your head, aren't you? They've been filling you with all this nonsense, and now you're trying to blame me for things that aren't even real. My friends didn't make me feel this way, he said firmly. You did. They just gave me the push to finally say something about it. And I'm glad they did, because we can't keep going like this, Brittany. This isn't healthy. It's not fair to either of us. I crossed my arms and leaned back in my chair. Oh, so what's your solution then? Therapy? Divorce? Are you just going to throw in the towel because I make a few jokes you don't like? This isn't about the jokes, he said. This is about respect, about whether or not you even want to be with me. Because right now it feels like you don't. That's insane, I scoffed. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. No, he said, his voice steady now. I'm asking for the truth. Is there someone else? Or is it just that I was never the guy you really wanted? The question hit like a punch to the gut, and for a second I couldn't speak. My first instinct was to deny it, to lash out. But something in his tone stopped me. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even really accusing me of anything. He just sounded done. I stood up, pushing my chair back harder than I meant to. You know what, Derek? Maybe your friends were right. Maybe this is a lost cause. You want to sit here and play the victim like you've been some perfect husband, but you haven't been. And maybe, just maybe, I'm not the bad guy here. Maybe we're just not meant to be together. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with this calm, almost resigned expression. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to figure out if there was anything left worth fighting for. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Because I can't keep doing this, Brittany. We either fix it or we walk away." I didn't have an answer. For the first time in a long time, I genuinely didn't know what to say. Derek and I sat in silence for what felt like forever after he asked that question. Fix it or walk away? I wasn't used to him putting me on the spot like that. Normally, he'd back down, let me deflect or change the subject, and everything would just go back to normal. But not this time. He was dead serious, and I could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air between us. Finally, I sighed, trying to sound as sincere as possible. "All right, if you want to fix it, we'll try counseling." His eyebrows raised slightly, and I could see he wasn't expecting me to agree so quickly. "Really?" "Yes," I said, leaning forward and clasping my hands together like I was being completely genuine. "I don't want to throw this marriage away. If you think counseling will help, then let's do it." It wasn't a total lie. I really didn't want to get divorced. I liked my life the way it was, and Derek was a big part of that. But honestly, I figured this whole thing was just a phase he was going through. He was feeling himself after that little pep talk from his friends, but he'd come back down to earth soon enough. Agreeing to schedule counseling? Sure, that was easy. Actually going through with it? That was a different story entirely. I told him I'd find a therapist and set something up, but weeks went by, and I never actually did it. Every time he brought it up, I had a perfectly reasonable excuse ready to go. "Oh, I've been swamped at work," or "all the good ones I found are completely booked up," or "I'm still waiting for someone to call me back." He seemed to believe me at first, but eventually the questions just stopped coming. I figured he'd gotten over the whole thing, just like I thought he would. Then one night, he brought it up again. We were sitting on the couch watching TV, and he just turned to me and said, "You never actually scheduled counseling, did you?" I froze for a second, but quickly recovered. "I told you, I've been trying. It's not as easy as it sounds to find someone good." "Brittany, don't lie to me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You never planned to do it, did you?" I rolled my eyes, immediately getting defensive. "Oh, come on, Derek. Don't act like I don't care about this marriage. I said I'd do it, and I will." "No," he said, cutting me off. "You won't, and you don't care. Not enough, anyway. If you did, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now." "Here we go again," I muttered, crossing my arms. "Why do you always have to make me the villain in every situation?" "Because you won't take responsibility for anything," he snapped, his voice rising. "You don't respect me, Brittany. You don't even take this seriously. And honestly, I'm done pretending this is going to work. I want a divorce." I stared at him, completely stunned. "What did you just say?" "I said I want a divorce," he repeated, his tone steady and sure. "This isn't healthy for either of us. You don't respect me, and I can't be with someone who doesn't even want to try to fix things." I laughed, but it was more out of disbelief than anything else. "You're not serious." "I am," he said, looking me dead in the eye. "I've been thinking about this for a while now. I just needed to make sure this wasn't fixable. And it's not." "You're being completely ridiculous," I said, shaking my head. "You're just mad right now. You'll calm down tomorrow and see how stupid this whole thing is." "No, Brittany," he said firmly. "I'm not mad. I'm clear-headed. I deserve better than this." That's when it really hit me. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't trying to make a point or win an argument. He actually meant it. He wanted out of our marriage. And I completely panicked. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped, jumping up from the couch and glaring down at him. "You want a divorce after everything I've done for you? After all the years I've put up with you being weak and passive and—" "Stop," he said sharply. But I was way past the point of listening. "No, you're going to hear this," I said, my voice getting louder and more shrill. "You're pathetic, Derek. You've always been pathetic. You let me walk all over you for years, and now suddenly you think you're some big tough guy because your little friends told you to grow a backbone? You're a complete joke." "Brittany!" "No!" I shouted, and I could feel tears starting to stream down my face. "I wish I never married you. You're an embarrassment, a fragile, weak excuse for a man. You can't even handle a simple joke without running to your friends like a little child. And now you think you're somehow better than me?" By the time I finished my rant, I was shaking all over, my chest heaving with emotion. But as the words hung in the air between us, I realized something. There was no one else to blame for this mess. Not Derek, not his friends, not anyone else, just me. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression completely unreadable. Then he stood up and walked toward the door. "You don't need to say anything else," he said quietly. "I'll stay at Marcus's place for now. You can call me when you've had time to think about what you really want." And just like that, he was gone. For the first time in our entire relationship, I wasn't the one in control of the situation. And for the first time, I genuinely didn't know if I wanted him to come back. Weeks went by after Derek told me he wanted a divorce. He stayed at Marcus's place most nights, but would come back to the house every few days to pick up clothes or sort through his stuff. Every single time I saw him, it felt like he was a completely different person. He didn't look at me the same way, didn't speak to me with any warmth or familiarity. It was like I was a total stranger to him, and honestly, it was killing me inside. I'd try to make small talk whenever he came by, anything to break through the coldness between us, but he kept everything short and polite, like he was talking to a co-worker he barely knew. The minute he left, I'd fall apart completely. I'd sit on the couch and just cry, wondering how things had gotten so bad so fast. But as much as I hated the situation, I couldn't bring myself to take any real responsibility for what had happened. I kept telling myself it was his fault, that he'd let his friends poison his mind against me. That's what I had to believe to keep myself from completely drowning in regret. When the divorce was finally finalized, it was as fair as these things could be. Nobody got screwed over, and neither of us walked away with significantly more than the other. I kept the house, he kept the car, and we split our savings evenly down the middle. But it didn't feel like winning anything. It felt like losing a part of myself that I couldn't get back. After the papers were signed, Derek stopped coming around altogether. I'd see updates on his social media every now and then, pictures of him smiling and laughing with Marcus and the guys, or hiking in places I didn't even know he was interested in. He looked genuinely happy, free even. And the comments from his friends made it crystal clear that they were completely on his side in all of this. People I thought were our friends stopped reaching out to me entirely. No more invites to parties, no more texts to check in and see how I was doing. It was like I'd been completely cut out of the entire social group. At first I was furious about it. How could they all just turn on me like that? But deep down I knew exactly why. They weren't really my friends. They were his friends. And they didn't like me. Maybe they never had. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, the silence from everyone else didn't bother me nearly as much as Derek's obvious happiness did. Every time I saw him post a picture or update his status, it was another reminder that he was clearly better off without me in his life. That stung more than anything else. I wanted to believe he was just putting on a show for social media, but the smile in his photos didn't look fake at all. He looked confident, different, like the kind of man I used to wish he'd be. But it was too late for any of that to matter now. I tried to distract myself and move on with my life, but nothing felt right anymore. Dating apps were a complete joke. The guys I met were either total weirdos, completely broke, or just looking for hookups when I wanted something more serious. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore, to be honest. All I knew was that I didn't want to end up alone forever. But with every passing week, that possibility started to feel more and more real. I still told myself that the divorce was probably for the best, that Derek wasn't really the kind of man I needed, that I'd eventually find someone stronger and more decisive who could actually handle being with me. But every time I saw his name pop up on my newsfeed, that little voice in the back of my head would whisper that maybe I'd made a huge mistake, and that maybe, just maybe, I'd been the real problem all along. But I'd never say that out loud. Not to anyone.